Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast. It is Tuesday, June 8th. Michael Beller, Brandon Funston, Jake Seeley here with you. Guys, this is only like the second show the three of us have done together in like the last 2 months. I was out for a while. Jake was out last week. It feels good to start getting the band back together at the beginning of the summer. We know this is going to pick up about a month from now after the 4th when we get really into the heart of draft prep season. It feels good that we're going to get 3-4 episodes under our belt together before we turn to then. How you guys doing today?
Good. Got news. We got real news. Real news, not rumors. Yeah. Not Aaron Rodgers as the world turns crap. We got actual tangible news. So
that's he didn't show up to camp. What a surprise.
I know, right? I know. Should we spend some time on that? I don't think so. We'll worry about Aaron Rodgers and the Packers and where he's going when we actually have to worry about it. We do have some real news to talk about. I am very excited to get into that. Of course, we will spend quite a bit of time on the Julio Jones trade today. We'll also take a look at Jake's breakout wide receivers. Not all of them. Be sure to check out the column on the website if you are a subscriber. And if you're not a subscriber, theathletic.com/fantasyfootballpod will get you in the door for $3.99 a month. Jake's got 10 breakout receivers for this season. We're going to talk about just a couple of them, some guys who potentially burned people last year, why you should be buying back in on them this season. We're also going to talk a little bit about Lamar Jackson and a potential new look for the Ravens offense, or maybe a new wrinkle is the better way to say that. And also, we've got a lot of time between now and draft season in earnest, so I thought it would be fun if we start dropping in some segments that we can keep going to. One of them, we're going to play a little trivia, guess that player. I'm going to give you a few clues throughout the show. Think about it as the show's going on. When we get to the end, we will talk about the player for a couple of minutes. So let's start there. First clue about this player. Guess that player here on June 8th. I am widely viewed as a fantasy number one at my position. So yes, we're keeping it broad. There are a lot of guys who fit that definition. Clue 2 and clue 3 should help you out a little bit more paired with that. So keep that in mind. Let's get to Julio Jones, guys. Julio. Oh, yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
For everybody out there, maybe doing the same thing I did. When I read it, I was thinking number one. I was like, that's only 4 people. Like, so I was like, you said a lot of people. Yeah, I was thinking V1.
40
I am
45
QB 1 through 12. I am wide receiver 1 through 12. Gotcha. I am running back 1 through 12. I am one of those, not just QB1, RB1, wide receiver 1. Tight end 1. Anyone who fits into that 1 through 12 band at their position. That's who we're talking about here. So that's the first clue that you've got. Julio Jones, he might not be in that group anymore, but he is definitely on the move and a number 1 in real life when he is healthy. So the Titans now have themselves 2 legit stud receivers with Julio next to A.J. Brown. We all know the details by now, but it couldn't hurt to recap. Julio goes to the Titans. Tennessee gets a 22-second, a 23-4th. The Titans also get a 23-6th. Those are the details of the trade. Let's break this down from all angles, guys. First, let's start out on the Titans side. And obviously we can't talk about one guy without talking about another, but I'm just going to start it out with Julio himself. Jake, obviously you've taken a deep look at this. Julio goes from Atlanta to Tennessee. Does that change his bottom line ranking for you at all?
Not really. He was already a mid to high wide receiver 2, and that's who he is at this point in his career, sadly. With Atlanta, he might have been able to get back to low-end wide receiver 1. Mostly the health would have been the question there, but we were talking about the efficiency of the Titans offense versus the inefficiency of the Falcons, but the Falcons pass more, and I think it all offsets. But now he's just similar to what he was with the Falcons, is that even if Julio was healthy, I think we were going into 2021 assuming that Ridley has now passed him. Like Ridley was top 5, maybe 6, 7 at worst consensus, where Julio was a fringe wide receiver 1. Is now Ridley being the number 1. But just like the Titans, this is one of those situations where there's a few throughout the NFL. It's fine when you have 2 wide receiver 1s. You could have 2 wide receiver 1s in fantasy as well on the same team. We've seen it happen year after year after year after year. So I say Julio, the biggest thing is, is the touchdowns. Are they going to go up? Yeah, maybe from an efficiency standpoint, maybe he stops scoring only around 6 a year and maybe gets to 7 or 8, but is it going to be fewer targets? Absolutely. Is it going to be fewer receptions? Probably, but maybe a better reception rate. But all that being said, it comes down to the initial projection update. It happens to be that I was already working on my projections this week, and it was good timing for me, by the way. Yeah. But Julio came in at wide receiver 17. I think that's a fair spot, and I think he could finish better than that.
Yeah, and I actually think that Julio in like the early kind of experts drafts right after the trade was going right about. I think that was his early ADP and post-trade draft. So I think that's kind of where most people are tabbing him as a mid wide receiver too. And I kind of agree with everything he said. I think I see it as mostly a lateral move. Obviously a lot higher passing volume in Atlanta, but a lot more efficiency, as you said. A little bit narrower tree of people to throw to as well. So I can see Julio Jones and AJ Brown and Michael Salfino kind of dove into this in a column, ending up with this pretty similar target share, whereas AJ Brown kind of led in that department over Corey Davis last year. I wouldn't be surprised, and Salfino said this as well, that maybe they're similar. And he kind of laid it out there that if it's kind of similar offense to last year, that if they're both healthy, there's about 120 targets for each of them. And I can see that. And you can eat off of that for sure.
Well, let's get into that actually for a second. We can talk about the specifics of AJ Brown wrapped up in this, but last year it was AJ Brown and Corey Davis, and they worked in the tight ends where they did. Obviously Julio Jones changes the equation, and we know that this team loves Derrick Henry as it should. We know that they have that run first ethos to them, and that they've ridden that to a couple of very successful seasons in a row, including a appearance in an AFC championship game. But do they have to change their stripes a little bit? Do you make a trade like this, getting Julio Jones, pairing him with AJ Brown, putting the most physically imposing wide receiver duo on the field, and not change your stripes at least a little bit? Or should we still be expecting a 320 carry whatever season out of Derrick Henry? How do you look at this, Jake?
So 320 carries would be a complete game change anyway. He had ridden the ball 378 times last year. So I think that if anything, they're changing their plan for this season, no matter what happened. Maybe if you say before Julio Jones, and now that the draft has happened, and then we have the Josh Reynolds situation was their number 2 until this happened. Like all that might have said, all right, he's still running the ball 350 times. Mm-hmm. I don't think they wanted to, and that's why they made this trade. And I just think a lot of things fell differently. I've been the one that's sitting here saying, what has this team told me? The team has told me that Josh Reynolds is their number 2. I think this team has also not wanted that to be the case. It's just, the draft capital is elsewhere, things they needed to do. There wasn't the move to be made in free agency. The Kenny Golladay, we can argue all day long about being overpaid. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to bring back Corey Davis for what he was looking for. But, you look at Corey Davis, a little less than 100 targets in 14 games. So you take 16 games, and now again, 17th game. Can we make that? Can I sidebar here real quick?
Yes, you can.
No. Can we? Are we going to transition from 2020 to 2021 talking in 16 game like hypothesis because this thing is like I would say is like 100 targets. Well, obviously he's going to go over 100 targets for 17 games, but I would say 100 targets would have been for 60. You see what I'm saying? It's kind of like
I think the most useful way to talk about it is to still talk about it for this year in our 16-game mindset, because we know it's going to be more in 17 games, but we can't know how much more. So I think this year we still have, we talk about it in a 16-game mindset, and then next year we start transitioning to the 17-game mindset.
Well, here's the deal. Like we in fantasy, not me in some leagues, but for the most part, play 15 games, right? But we always talked about it in 16-game kind of statistical season.
Right.
But now we're going to 17 game, but we're actually going to have 16 meaningful games for fantasy.
Right.
So I think now we transition to saying 16 games so that it fits with our fantasy model, and so we can still look at it through that lens. We just changed, and we're ignoring a week now, like we should have probably, in years past.
Well, no, like everybody did except for you, Brandon. That was
right.
Really
Well, maybe we're going to get the most accurate set of fantasy relevant projections that we've ever gotten, because of the fact that we have 16 games that mean something. And we are now we always, like you said, Brandon, we always use the full 16 game sample, even though 15 games counted. And so now all 16 games are counted. Maybe we're going to have maybe Jake, maybe you and all your projections brethren are just going to look like freaking geniuses this year, nailing your projections to the point, at least in terms of volume stuff.
Yeah, mine already did. So, let's just go back to Corey Davis. The point being, Corey Davis is on pace for 105 targets over 16 games. So you would feel like that's the floor for Julio, and that's where I'm coming back to in this whole thing. I would expect that Derrick Henry doesn't run 370 times. 320 seems like a good level. Actually, I could tell you, do I still have my projections open? I do. Let's see where Derrick Henry. I have for 341. So over like kind of in the middle of what you said, and then 370. Yeah. That's also 17 games.
What are the target numbers on AJ and
No. People Julio have to wait for the draft kit for that.
Okay. Well, fair enough. We're selling subscriptions here at The Athletic. Come on.
So the point being is I have Julio Jones between 110, 120 targets. And I think that puts him, again, to go back to this whole conversation, wide receiver 17 might be a little bit low.
Well, I don't think the Titans are planning to do anything drastically different. I think they look at the fact that they lost Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith, and Josh Reynolds was their only replacement there. Well, that's not going to replace those guys. And so now you get Julio Jones and you've more than replaced them. I actually think they'll also throw in Darrington Evans a little bit more. So you can lean a little bit more on the passing game, a little bit more on a backup running back that from everybody I've heard around the team, they want to get him more involved and limit Derrick Henry a little bit more going forward. But this has been a very efficient offense, and offense is not what's been the problem for Tennessee. It's been the defense.
Right.
So, I don't know that they need to change anything on offense. They need to get better on defense, and I think that they're going to be right there as it's a big-time contender in the AFC.
AJ Brown, I don't think there's any way to paint him as anything other than a fantasy loser in this. Is it a significant loser, though? Like, are you pushing him down that far, Brandon? You can hear in my voice that I don't think he should be pushed down too far. A spot here or there. Maybe suddenly he's, now behind, I don't know, Stephon Diggs. Maybe you had Stephon Diggs one spot behind him and now you flip them. But this can't be that big of a move, can it?
Well, he's a stud, but I think there was some guys that I had pretty tight. Like I was going back and forth between him and DK Metcalf. I even have Justin Jefferson kind of in that range. I want to wait and see on Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas, but Michael Thomas is right there. And you got to remember AJ Brown, for as good as he was last year, I think he had 65 catches right there, or 70 catches. And like if Julio Jones is there and we're still looking at that kind of level of catch production, I mean, he has to be highly efficient as a touchdown scorer. We know Derrick Henry is going to get his, and maybe Julio Jones, this unlocks him in the red zone here in Tennessee where he had troubles in Atlanta. So if he has to share some red zone work and some touchdowns get spread out, that could hurt AJ Brown. That's enough for me to drop him kind of mid to slightly stepping a little bit later in that wide receiver 1 class for me.
Yeah, I actually had him at wide receiver 3 before this, and now he's down to wide receiver 8. So again, not a huge difference. It's still, it just goes from being second rounder, maybe even close to the turn alongside Hill and Ridley and Diggs, as Brandon mentioned, to now he's in there with, Thomas and who else? Justin Jefferson and Hopkins and stuff like that. And I think that's, okay, he went from tier 1 to tier 2, and that's still an amazing tier 2.
So that's like early second round to late second round, give or take a pick here or there.
Yeah, I'd probably say more late second than he was early before this.
Right. How about Ryan Tannehill? What does this do to him? You add a guy like Julio Jones. I don't care what the centerpiece of your offense is. That's a big add. That's a big get. Even if it is just like you said, Brandon, they lost Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith. They only added Josh Reynolds. Clearly they were going to add another pass catcher to the mix. Still, Julio Jones is Julio Jones. I don't care what the health concerns are. Are we bumping Tannehill up at all because of this, Jake?
So yes and no. So the problem is so Tannehill was already a QB1 last year. Sure. He bumps up and stays, so that's where it's no. Yeah, I still have him as a QB1 again, but it bumps him up a little bit because I had him just outside the QB1 before this, mostly because it's not the passing. I think people forgot how many touchdowns he ran for, and I think that's hard to repeat for Tannehill. It's like he does run, but at the same time, is he going to run for that many again? And most quarterbacks, even in general, you would say that that's hard to repeat unless you're Josh Allen, Kyler Murray. You're going to talk about the upper crust there. And even Kyler Murray, ask what he ran for 11 last year, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think 11 is right, yeah.
11. Yeah, like to have him run 11 again, I think most people would take the under if you were given a line in Vegas on that. But 266 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns. That's why. So I have him for 4 rushing touchdowns. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that's enough at the quarterback position. Once you get past that upper tier of quarterbacks, that 1 rushing touchdown could be the difference of 5 spots. So this boosts him, but I already had him being offset from that. So it's kind of, I have him a QB 11 for to end the question on a simple answer.
Yeah, I was just in the draft. I drafted him 12th yesterday. I agree. I think this kind of just settles any of, are you going to put Trevor Lawrence ahead of him or whatever? It's like, it just kind of settles is he on the fringe of the QB1 or is he a QB1? In my mind, he's a QB1. You go by, what did he have? 10 starts the year before. He was a lock solid mid QB1 during that span. And then he was
like QB4 in that span.
He was ridiculous. And he was a QB1 last year. So you got like 26 games of being a QB1, and now you get Julio Jones. Like, throw out the luck on the rushing touchdowns. He has 11, I think, in those 26 games. Like, you have to say that that's going to be part of the equation. Whether it regresses a little bit, it's going to be better than average. So, and now you get another just, superstar in your lineup. I don't see that makes him go down. You have to, the only place to go from there is up.
Any concrete effect on Derrick Henry here, or is it all speculative? Maybe Julio factors in more in the red zone. Now they have 2 legitimate receiving threats in the red zone. Is there anything we can really point to, or is Derrick Henry, Brandon?
I think he's Derrick Henry. Like, honestly, I think he goes into top 4. He should. I saw like early returns on post-draft. Like one of the first experts drafts, he went number 2. That's still a little bit strong. I'm still going Dalvin Cook. But I think you can argue I'm right there with Saquon Barkley at number 3, or if you like Alvin Kamara at number 3. But I think he's a little bit further of an argument into that spot there, especially with Barkley talking about being slow played early in the year and with the quarterback change in New Orleans. I basically what I'm saying, I think this helps him a little bit. I think it helps Derrick Henry a little bit.
Yeah, Derrick Henry RB4 before this, and he's still RB4 after it. It's no change for me.
Yeah. Just wanted to mention him. Didn't think there would be a change, and I guess we have to pour one out for Josh Reynolds. Anthony Ferkser, even a little bit too, but man, Jake, I'm sorry, dude. I was excited for you. I was excited for the Josh Reynolds hype. I was excited for you to be able to point back to this like 6 months from now. I really was pumped for you, and now he's back to wide receiver 3, totally overlooked, just like he was in LA. Do you have any parting words on Josh Reynolds?
No, maybe he can be like Russell Gage and Julio misses half the season and then they can finish inside the top 40 still. Or maybe that happens. But so for the update on Josh Reynolds, he's not only in the projections behind Russell Gage, he's also behind even Olamide Zaccheaus because he's down at wide receiver 89. So all these early drafts, all these dynasty drafts, all this, this is the downside. You can get a ton of value drafting early, but this is definitely the downside. I'm super upset for Josh Reynolds.
I think being the wide receiver 3 in Tennessee is similar to him being the wide receiver 4 with the Rams. It's about the same. So
right.
Maybe the wide receiver
I was in a slow draft. I literally took Josh Reynolds at wide receiver 50, and there was one pick made since that pick, and then the trade happened. So it just completely blew up that pick.
Oh man, if only you waited a little bit longer, you wouldn't be stuck with wide receiver 89 in Jake's rankings at wide receiver 50. Let's flip this over to the Atlanta side of things. Calvin Ridley proved himself last year a legit wide receiver 1 without Julio on the field, proved he could handle all the responsibilities that is thrown on a real life 1, and he translated that to a monster fantasy receiver 1 season. How high is he now, Jake?
The same. I haven't moved him. Ridley didn't move for me. Some people are moving him, but not for me. I still have him wide receiver 4. The real part about it is we know the numbers with and without, but he's great with them and he's great without them. The great without look great, but go look at the numbers with them and they were just almost as good. I'm going to go back and make a comparison for the years where everybody was always crapping on Drew Brees and they're like, oh, he's not as good on the road. He still averaged before his fall off, because I wrote an article about this. He still averaged over 300 yards a game and almost 2 touchdowns on the road. It's just at home, it was like 340 and 3. So he's still amazing with and without him. So it really comes down to, if you want to put him at 3, I don't have a problem with it ahead of Diggs. But if Rodgers is back, and I know this is all speculative as of now, but we still have to keep playing as Aaron Rodgers is back. If you want to kick out Devontae Adams, that's fine. I have no problem with it. But I still go Adams. I still go Hill. If you want to take Ridley over Diggs at number 3 or go Diggs, then Ridley, I have no problem with either. But the top 4 are still the top 4.
Yeah, I don't think I'm putting him in my top 4, but I don't have any problem with him anywhere.
Who are you putting in front of him then?
Who are you putting in your top 4?
Yeah. Well, again, it comes down to Devontae Adams. I guess if Devontae Adams, that's something that we could talk about. Tyreek Hill.
Well, you have to assume for now. You have to assume that Adams has Rodgers for now.
Okay.
Adams has Rodgers until he doesn't.
Yeah, then I'm going to go Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, and then probably DK Metcalf
Homer, we all saw it coming. Yeah. Everyone saw DK Metcalf coming. We knew it.
There you go.
You know what else everybody saw except for Brandon apparently is that he disappeared in the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, that's and we're gonna pick up right where we left off. Is that what happened? Yeah, they went cover 2. Seattle's offense was all about Russell throwing deep, and teams figured it out. It's a completely different offense this year. I mean, it's the Rams offense. So I mean, and it wasn't run heavy last year either. They were actually like, I think right in the middle of the league in rush percentage. So
yeah, that's actually an argument for like, can it really get that much better?
Absolutely can. There's not a wide. I mean, who are they throwing to? They're throwing to Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf.
Who is Atlanta throwing to?
Exactly. Well, we've been here. I don't know. I feel like DK is more of a true number 1. We'll see. I mean, Calvin Ridley, I have no problem with. But
I smell a side bet here, guys. I smell a Calvin Ridley, DK Metcalf side bet between you two.
There's not a whole lot of difference.
I would have given him odds.
Hey, speaking of Russell Wilson, by the way, you guys, we've been sitting here for 20 minutes. You haven't asked me at all about this sweet jersey. It's actually a Lee Evans jersey, in case you're wondering. This is classic Lee Evans. He was a junior his last year in Wisconsin when I was a freshman. He was the man. Got this Lee Evans jersey when I was a freshman, and I've had it ever since. So yeah,
he had a couple good years in the NFL.
He had some great years. All anyone remembers him for is the drop in the AFC Championship game when he was with Baltimore. But he had some solid years.
I remember good Lee Evans. I'm looking him up. Was it 2 good years? I'm looking.
He had like a 10 touchdown year.
He had a good year with Buffalo. He had some good years with Baltimore. Lovely.
Yeah, he had 2 good years.
He had a couple good years with Buffalo when no receivers were having good years in Buffalo.
Yeah, that's for you, Lee Evans. Madison, red blood runs deep. Kyle Pitts, let's talk about him really quick here. Obviously, probably the biggest winner, I would say, in the trade with Julio going to Tennessee. Brandon, how big of a winner is he in your eyes?
Well, I'd already kind of moved him to 4, even before the Julio trade. I just like believing in his opportunity. I can't move him into the Darren Waller, George Kittle, and Travis Kelce, like anywhere above any of those guys. I think if they're healthy, those guys are like potential 100 catch guys. But I'll move him ahead of Mark Andrews, who was, you're following TDs there. They're talking about actually throwing to wide receivers now. So like I can easily move Kyle Pitts to number 4 and feel good about it. I mean, who else is going to be there? And we have to trust our eyes on Kyle Pitts. He's a ridiculous talent, and taking him that high, they are completely motivated to get the most out of him at this point.
Yeah. We already covered this in super in depth. You even pulled the clip, Beller, to promote it. Like
I did.
Kyle Pitts is number 4, still number 4 for me. He's just more number 4. He's kind of separated from the group behind him. And is he sort of in a tier of 1, not quite pushing those top 3? Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. I think this actually puts him more on Waller's heels than he even was before, which I already said that he was. If he gets over 100 targets, which is now almost to lock it in. If you want to see my full breakdown of him, he doesn't qualify as a breakout because he's a rookie, as we talked about before on the show. But that the breakout tight ends, I started with Kyle Pitts to break him down. So it went even more and more. To be honest with you, I would not be shocked at this point if he passes Darren Waller. I just think that I know everybody's
George Kittle's my number 3, and I've been seeing this more and more. I've seen Waller go number 2 in a few drafts.
And I'm not doing that. I don't get it. I understand. I don't. I think that everything.
You could easily come up with a reason to why that is.
You could too. So make your argument when I'm done trying to get through my sentence.
Okay. Go ahead.
Everything for whatever people want to throw out there everything broke right for this guy, and he was the only weapon for this guy, and this was the only offense that they had, and blah, blah, blah. That's what you can say 1,000% about Darren Waller last year. Darren Waller was, you had failed rookies across the board at wide receiver. You had Nelson Aguilar being the only thing that they had at wide receiver and somehow resurrected a career, but everybody wants to poo-poo Nelson Aguilar because, they had nothing else. So I really go back to what Darren Waller was the year before that with 15, 20 targets. And he had 140 something last year. And I just don't think he's repeating that. I think if you look at, you bring in Kenyon Drake, and we've already talked about how frustrating we are for that with Josh Jacobs. And you still have Jalen Richard, who's also tweeting himself, by the way, out there, pictures in camp. I've never seen a player tweet his own picture in camp before. So you have that. I do think Ruggs is going to be better this year. I still think John Brown is one of the more underrated wide receiver signings this all season that people have seemingly forgotten about. And now you have Brian Edwards who can slide in there and just be a number 3. It comes down to 140 targets, and I don't think he's getting 140 targets. And if you give him 120, I think he falls down to at least tight end 3. And if you gave me 100, I'll throw this out there, and this isn't even like a hot take thing. You give me 120 targets of Darren Waller, and you give me 100 targets of Kyle Pitts with Matt Ryan, I'm taking the 120 targets of Kyle Pitts and Matt Ryan.
Yeah, 117 targets in 2019. He had 90 catches. They have a incredible rapport, and the only thing that held Darren Waller down was the 3 touchdowns, and we expected regression, and we got it last year. He was really the same guy. It's a continuation of 2019 to 2020 with more touchdowns. And what changes there? Well, we'll see about Henry Ruggs and Brian Edwards. That's just conjecture. And John Brown is like a 1-for-1 replacement for Nelson Aguilar. So I look at San Francisco, and George Kittle has a hard time staying healthy. You got Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. What if those guys are healthy all year? And by the way, what if you have a change at quarterback, during the year, and there's an adjustment period? Do we automatically know that Trey Lance is just going to, fall in love? I mean, look at Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard. Yeah, they threw to George Kittle. It should be just business as usual with Trey Lance. But there are question marks, I think, with George Kittle, and Darren Waller's just been the apple of Derek Carr's eye for 2 years in a row. And I don't see how that changes. I just have less questions. And when I'm drafting that high, I don't think there's going to be such a massive difference that if Darren Waller, doesn't have the stars aligned season and George Kittle does, that I'm going to be like, oh, that just killed me. I just feel like it's a safer floor with Darren Waller.
A lack of respect for John Brown. But also, Beller, did you notice one thing, Brandon? Brandon says a lot of conjecture, and then I counted. You said what if 3 times.
Yeah, but that was conjecture on the 49.
On your argument, so it's better.
This is great. You guys, we are talking about a Julio Jones trade to Tennessee, and we've already got you guys lined up for 2 side bets. We've got Calvin Ridley versus DK Metcalf, and now we've got Darren Waller versus George Kittle.
Let's put mine into context and be honest with you. Like, I'm still drafting Darren Waller before I Kyle Pitts. Like, let me make that
I'm
clear.
I'm saying Darren Waller versus George Kittle. That's what I'm not saying. Darren Waller versus Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. No, I'll still. Yeah. I would still take Kittle number 2.
Yeah. All right, but this is great. We're gonna drop the. I'm gonna keep a running.
There's no.
I said I would do this last year.
Played.
I said I was gonna keep a running list of these last year, and then last year became last year, and it didn't happen. This year, I'm doing it. I'm writing it down right now. We got Kittle.
It can't be fantasy points per game. It has to be total fantasy points for the season.
No, it can't. You can't throw your own. We'll
negotiate off camera. We'll figure this out. We'll talk about it.
I just want to, because Saquon Barkley versus David Johnson last year. Well, guess what? You won for David Johnson because of injury. Get the hell out of here.
That's how you draft, though. That's how you draft. That's why you weigh it. Julio Jones was like, what, wide receiver 12 or something last year, but in actual fantasy points scored, he had 9 games. So
that's what it matters. You do fantasy points scored per game, and we set a all
right, if we're gonna do points per game, I'll put Kittle number 2.
No. I was going to say, Brandon, but no, you didn't even let me finish again. I was going to say, you can set a minimum. You could say 9.5 games or something like that. Like, so you kind of get at least a. That
was how Jake snaked his way out of losing to me in our Aaron Jones Austin Eckler side bet last year. Was that Austin Eckler didn't play enough games? Aaron Jones was running away with that thing, running away with it. Let's run away with the end of this segment really quick. Matt Ryan, Russell Gage, Olamide Zaccheaus, Mike Davis. Is there any? I mean, Matt Ryan probably just stuck in QB2 land, 1 QB leagues where possible. You're streaming him, but you're not starting him. You're not leaning on him as a starter, a safe QB2 in Superflex. I think that's pretty uncontroversial. Mike Davis, Russell Gage, Olamide Zaccheaus. Jake, is there anything anything interesting to say about any of these guys after the trade?
If I have Gage in redraft or dynasty, I would think to sell high because I don't know that he improves from last year. I think he just replicates last year's that 110 targets, maybe gets 120. I think the Zaccheaus is the interesting one because he works out of the slot so much, and I think that might be the one that sees the biggest boost, where you probably get a maybe like an Adam Humphries wide receiver 4 type season. I can see that happening.
What Mike Davis? Things just keep falling his way right now. Like, Jake, where do you have him ranked? Because I think he's got to be like right at that number 20 spot, or like give or take one.
I didn't sort their running back projections yet. My early, just out of my gut feeling, I had him at RB23, but I haven't sorted the actual projection rankings yet.
I don't know. It's just like I think he's going to be in line for a huge workload. And
still, as a sidebar, I still don't think Atlanta's done. Like
I know. That's
from running back and wide receiver. Like I made the joke. Mike Clay tweeted the depth chart for the Falcons yesterday after the trade, and I jokingly said until they pick up the phone and call Fitzgerald. Like I feel like they're going to bring in 2 vets, one at running back and one at wide receiver.
Or Golden Tate,
No, could we stop Golden Tate? Not you, just people like we already saw he's done.
Well, he's just one of the guys out there, but yeah. I think
maybe they bring back Todd Gurley.
I wouldn't be surprised that the Lions brought him in for whatever stupid reason that was. Adrian Peterson's still Frank Gore is still hanging around.
Yeah, right. Like,
how did they not go after Kerryon Johnson at least? Like that would have been
I don't think they had the money yet. That was the issue.
Maybe.
Right. Oh, that was trade. So who knows?
All right, one more thing I actually want to hit on really quick before we move on from this. We have some updated betting odds from BetMGM on this. Really just want to look at the Titans here. In the AFC South, they went from plus 110 to plus 105. To win the AFC, they went from plus 2,200 to plus 1,200. To win the Super Bowl, they went from plus 4,000 to plus 2,500. Those AFC and Super Bowl odds are pretty big jumps for a wide receiver, Julio or not Julio. Those are pretty sizable jumps to make for just adding a wide receiver. So the value was clearly before the trade. I think I would have loved those before. Don't really like those after. Is there anything about any of these lines that interests either of you at all? You can run away with it if you want to.
Not now. I wish I just could cash out. I actually had, I did throw back when the rumors started. I threw some on Tennessee. I had Tennessee at 2,000 and I think 3,000. Because they're very round numbers, I remember. So I wish you could cash out now. I'd be like, hey, I'll just take my $50 and get the hell out of here.
Can I just arbitrage this and take the difference?
Yeah, that's why. Like as a sidebar, like I had Brandon Grace. I had a $5 free bet. I threw it on Brandon Grace because he was like plus 8,800, and then the thing happened with the COVID situation. I was like, can I cash out now? Can I just give me $100? I'll cash out now. He didn't win, obviously, but that's what I'm saying. It's like what my point is if there's anywhere that lets you cash out or kind of hedge your bet somewhere, I'm with you in the fact that their odds now are just, they're not even appealing anymore.
Yeah.
Especially, you're basically even odds to win the South, which is fine. But I mean, what are you really going to do with that?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They're no better than, I think we would still view the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens as better than them.
And
Steelers
the Browns.
Or Browns. I think they're in the Steelers-Browns discussion as like the 4th team, but I don't know. I'm not sure I would take them as the 4th. It might be the Browns.
To give you some context surrounding that, the other odds in the AFC, comfortable favorites, Kansas City plus 210 to win the AFC. Then you've got a 3-way tie at plus 750, Bills, Ravens, and Cleveland Browns. Exactly. Plus 1,200, which is where the Titans sit. Correct. Yeah, they're at plus 1,200. Also plus 1,200 with them. Indy and Denver. Which has to assume an Aaron Rodgers trade. That's just them books protecting themselves preemptively.
I think they're hedging on that because if you put Aaron Rodgers on Denver, I think they would jump to like 600.
Sure. And with all the smoke that's been surrounding, with all the smoke that's been surrounding it, they can't expose themselves to Denver at like plus 2,500 right now or plus. Right. I mean, if the season started today and Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater is the quarterback there, Denver's plus. I mean, Pittsburgh's plus 2,500. Denver has to be worse than that, right?
Yeah, it has, easily. I think this is also too is that even if you left it at 2,000, I think the problem is like you probably had so much money coming in anyway. Yeah. Is that for the trying to if this happens type of situation?
Yeah. So then you go a step down from where Tennessee is at plus 1,200. You find New England and Miami 1,600. The Chargers at plus 1,800. Which if that defense can stay healthy, something to be talked into there. Plus 1,800 on the Chargers, and then the Steelers plus 2,500. So not a lot of faith in a team that really fell apart in the second half of the season last year.
You left off the plus 10,000 one. The Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I actually wrote here, they're plus 1,200 to win the South. You've got the Colts and the Titans at plus 105, and then the Jags at plus 1,200. I mean, I'm not saying the Jags are going to win, but 12-1, like, the Colts could be. I mean, look at the last few teams that have won on defense mainly, right? Jacksonville fell off the next year. The Bears fell off the next year. 49ers, there were a lot of injuries for them last season, but they fell off after riding their defense to the Super Bowl. Could the Colts be that team this year? I think potentially. The Titans, we talked about their defensive issues. Like, what if Trevor Lawrence is just awesome right away? Like, I think it might be worth 12-1
when he is awesome. Their Super Bowl bet is 125-1. I didn't realize it went up, and that was at 10,000. Now it's actually 12,500. I got to tell you, hey, if my Super Bowl bet cashes off, we're all taking vacation on my dime.
All right,
and you're burning your money if you're putting it on the Patriots. By the way, you're just burning your money.
I could not agree more with you there. And something else I couldn't agree more with is that HelloFresh, pretty delicious stuff at HelloFresh. HelloFresh cuts out stressful meal planning and grocery store trips so you can enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in about 30 minutes or less. They've got 25 plus recipes to choose from each week: vegetarian meals, craft burgers, special gourmet options, basically everything that you would serve Jake Seeley when he comes to your house. HelloFresh has got it. A very big variety, easy, delicious. It's fun to cook. It's easy to cook. It makes things, just as I said, very simple. And the deals are pretty great. According to a Zaccheaus dining survey, HelloFresh is 28% cheaper than shopping at your local grocery store and 72% cheaper than a restaurant meal without sacrificing any of the quality. Right now, you can go to HelloFresh.com/fantasy12 and use the code fantasy12 for 12 free meals, including free shipping. Again, that is HelloFresh.com/fantasy12. Use the code fantasy12. It'll get you free shipping and 12 free meals. Check it out. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. All right, guys, let's move on to another discussion here. I actually want to talk about Jake's breakout wide receivers. As I said earlier, the column is on the site along with breakout tight ends, which just came out. Need to be a subscriber. Athletic.com/fantasyfootballpod, $3.99 a month gets you everything, including these great breakout columns that Jake has been writing. Every other position gets 5. Wide receiver, unsurprisingly, gets 10. I want to talk about 3 with you guys. Is that okay?
Hold on. Speaking of getting things, do we get our second hint?
Oh, my God, Jake, thank you so much. Guess that player, clue number 2. See, it's new. We're still working or at least I'm still working the kinks out. Guess that player, clue number 2. This will be my 3rd year in the NFL. So clue number 1, I am a 1 at my position, 1 through 12. Clue number 2, this is my 3rd year in the NFL. Thank you, Jake. Look at this. This guy, feed him HelloFresh. This guy deserves it. Breakout wide receivers. I want to talk about 3 of them with you, focusing on guys who you maybe burned their managers with certain degrees of burn a little bit last year. The first one is someone who we've already referenced here, Henry Ruggs, right? Pretty good. Henry Ruggs, not the rookie year that really anyone expected of him, no matter how hard the transition from college to the pro game is. But Jake, he's on this list. Make the Henry Ruggs breakout argument for us here. And then Brandon, do whatever the hell you want to do after.
I've been saying it a lot, is Henry Ruggs. There's 2 things that went against him, is 1, being a rookie and ready to take on the NFL, and just being miscast. So in the first couple games last year when Bryan Edwards was healthy, for us, that's part of it too. You're asking 2 wide receivers that are rookies, 1 being one that, in my opinion, and this isn't like a victory lap situation, but Brandon knows this, like, because I think we were talking about Ziegler, or was it with Chris Media? So whatever. Ziegler was a huge fan of Bryan Edwards, and I said he's not ready to start. So I bring that up to say you have 2 rookies starting as your 1 and 2 at wide receiver, 1 who wasn't ready to start to begin with, but was thankfully going to be like the sacrificial lamb out there. Is he was going to be the one, Bryan Edwards drawing #1 coverage, being on the outside. Henry Ruggs was going to play that quote unquote what people want to just call big slot, but sometimes gets misconstrued, and kind of more of like a Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill's not a big slot, but kind of plays that position. With my biggest concern is what happened through those first couple games too, is that Hunter Renfrow was going to be the one hurt by them. Ruggs, those first 3-4 games before Edwards got hurt, was running out of the slot more. It was 60% of the time. And then Edwards got hurt. And then he's playing outside almost all the time. And that's the second part. Henry Ruggs is not an outside only wide receiver. He can move outside similar to Tyreek Hill. And no, I'm not saying he's ever going to be Tyreek Hill. Just drawing the comparisons to a lot of these receivers that we see now in the NFL. Should spend the majority of his time in the slot, 60%, maybe even 70%. But spend sometimes outside, not being the #1 corner, not being the #1 defensive attention, not getting double covered and bracketed and all that type of stuff, and just being able to play off that with Waller, who's going to help open up that area of the field as well. And you have a Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce situation with Waller and Ruggs, the lesser version by far, but that's where it went. And everything went wrong. He had to play outside. Renfro got to play back into the slot. Aguilar became a thing, who is, funny enough, is better equipped to play outside at this point of his career than Ruggs is. And let's go back to what Ruggs' profile was coming out of college. He can be a very dangerous wide receiver in the NFL. He needs to be somebody who has somebody across from him that can play outside and draw that coverage. I'm going back to what Brandon and I made the joke. I think you're poo-pooing on what John Brown not only still has left in the tank, but also what he brings to this offense now. And I think the biggest beneficiary of Brown being here is going to be Ruggs. Do I think he's going to be a top 20 wide receiver? Hell no. But can he be a top 40? I would bet money he finishes as a top 40, and that's an enormous jump because he was irrelevant last year.
I wouldn't take him as a top 40 guy. I actually just drafted him.
You don't have to.
Yeah, well, I took him as wide receiver 54. That's where I felt comfortable. He's still there, and I don't know that in a lot of leagues he'll, as people are talking about this, second year kind of correction for him, I think there's going to be this narrative that he's going to be a guy that's going to turn it around. I'm not sure. Like, what kind of worries me, and yeah, it was misuse, but like what worries me is like John Brown's the 1-for-1 replacement for Nelson Aguilar. I'm not poo-pooing John Brown. Like if he puts up Nelson Aguilar's numbers from last year, I think it's doable, and I think we'd be happy with that. And then there's Darren Waller, which we know Derek Carr loves. And even if Henry Ruggs, a top 10 pick, got 43 targets, played 13 games, never had more than 5 targets in a game, and had all the opportunity in the world, because who the hell else was there in that wide receiver core? I know he was partially injured at times, misused, but I just feel like the talent should have showed out a little bit more than that. And that just scares me. Like, I just don't know if there's going to be consistency here, if he's just going the route of Marquise Brown, where you're just like, yeah, he has a lot of talent, but can you rely on him week to week? I fear that. And I would not draft him as a starter. And you're saying that he's not going to be drafted as a starter. That's fine. If you want to take some upside bet on him as a guy off your bench, sure.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately where I think even no matter what happens this summer, that's where he's going to land. He's going to land as that sort of upside guy in your bench, bye-week plug-in. That's what you're thinking about him to start the season. Definitely think that he's an interesting guy in that regard.
Well,
I think someone – yeah, go ahead.
Thing to the positive, and maybe this will help you a little bit, Brandon, too, is that part of it comes down to, again, when we're talking about that coverage, and the coverage also when he's going deep downfield and having, top end corners on top of it, but also partly Derek Carr. And I know people are going to say, well, Derek Carr hasn't gone anywhere. But that rapport and not having a number one corner, and people have to understand this. Like Eli Manning, for his entire career, can never get on the same page as somebody wide open 40 yards downfield. How many times did we see him miss a throw? Derek Carr is better than that. He's middle of the pack. But I bring that up to say Henry Ruggs has 17.4 yards a target last year. It's just get on the same page a little bit, but also not have a top corner blanketing you, and you bring in some more of those passes. And maybe your Marquise Brown comparison is really good, but you're talking Marquise Brown. Yeah, that's still frustrating because we want more, but Marquise Brown is almost a top 30 wide receiver.
Yeah, and I would say, man, I like the idea of different usage, because I watched Henry Ruggs a lot, and those air yards, they were miserable looking. Like they were throwing, you're right. Like Eli Manning, it doesn't matter if the guy was 40. They were not on the same page at all with those deep passes. It never looked like they were even close to connecting consistently. So I would like to see them use him in a different way and bring those air yards down. I'd like to see what he can do on the shorter stuff underneath.
Let's move on to our next breakout wide receiver here. A little bit higher up the food chain, Jerry Judy, another guy who, maybe didn't quite hit expectations for his rookie season, but there were some mitigating circumstances in Denver. Had 113 targets, caught 52 of them for 856 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think a lot of people could get on board with this as a breakout case. What's your argument, Jake?
My argument is, did you not see yesterday's report? Teddy Bridgewater's targeting him more than anybody else.
There it is. Mark it down. June proclamations.
Never mind that Cortland Sutton's still working his way back from ACL.
Yeah. Obviously, everybody out there should know that this is a complete, utter joke that we're making here, and that's why Beller and Funston are saying what they're saying. And also, this article came out last week, so this is before that even came out. It's funny is I see the third person you chose, and it's almost going to be rinse and repeat to a degree.
You can bring him up. You can bring him up. It's Jalen Reagor.
Which, by the way, let's
put him together.
Holy crap! The amount of hate Jalen Reagor got in the comments. I mean, it was like this guy ran people's puppies over.
Everyone, there is so much just sort of this
vitriol,
traumatic stress from anyone tied to that Philly offense last year. It feels like you can't get a read on anyone involved with that offense from a season ago. There's just so much attendant disaster from all of that it's just like, I stay away.
Well, and that's the thing. All three of these guys, very similar situations, very similar factors in their downfall, and very similar in the post-hype sleepers. Their second season, so there hasn't like that long of a post-hype sleep. But this is where you make. We talk about it every single year. This is why I write last year's trash as a column. Every single year, you have people who are like, I'm not going back to him. Like, and especially these three being rookies last year. Jerry Judy, another one. He's like Juju Smith-Schuster. There's a little bit of a different comparison of like the big slot versus like a Tyreek Hill, smaller big slot type. Anyway, he's like Juju Smith-Schuster. There was no Courtland Sutton, similar to Henry Ruggs. He was forced to be the number one. He was also forced to deal with Drew Lock, and that still might be the case, but hopefully maybe Teddy Bridgewater does something for him. But you look at him, 69, even worse than Henry Ruggs. 69% of his snaps were out wide. You don't want that with Judy, and you don't get it with Judy because Courtland Sutton's back, as Brandon mentioned. Being the number two with Courtland Sutton out there with him, that alone is going to do worlds of benefit for his game. Judy is an extremely talented wide receiver who could be a number one on some teams with time, maybe in his third year. But as a number two, you have Courtland Sutton alongside him. That's an easy one, and that's why I bring up Jalen Reagor too. Is like it's funny. The first thing I said about Jalen Reagor right here in the article. Read Ruggs, rinse, and repeat. So they're not the same exact receiver, like size-wise and skill-wise, but they're very similar in the fact that Jalen Reagor, again, like Judy, like Ruggs, was forced to play outside all the time, forced to be the number one wide receiver, where everything went wrong in Philly to begin with between.
What about Travis Fulgham? What about those Travis Fulgham weeks?
Stop saying Jum. It's Fulgham. So get it right. You guys say his name right.
I have a friend whose last name is that, but pronounces it Fulgham. It's stuck in my head.
Well, I'm fixing it, but also put one out for him too. That's what, you guys know this. We talked about it on the show. I said as soon as he got treated as a number one by defenses, he was going to fall off. He's just not equipped to be a number one. Jalen Reagor is not equipped to be an outside only number one. Use him properly as a number two. Oh, by the way, they drafted Devontae Smith. Oh, by the way, the offensive line actually has some semblance of quality this year compared to what it was. They were on third string units last year. They have an offense designed for Jalen Hurts. They have Dallas Goedert, who also wasn't healthy for the majority of last season, and Zach Ertz. Like, he was asked to essentially be the guy, and that's why we saw Greg Ward doing things during last year. So you talk about 80, 90-plus targets for all three of these wide receivers. I would go Judy, then I would go Ruggs, Reagor are probably almost just in the same group. But I would go Judy over both of them. But all three of them, if you said they got 90 targets this year, I would have been shocked if all three of them finished inside the top 40.
Yeah, I feel like Judy stands alone. And I'd put Ruggs and Reagor in kind of a similar area. And like, I would have the same reservations about Reagor and think about him again as like this high upside guy after the top 50 receivers that maybe you want to roll the dice. And I worry about Jalen Hurts, worry about this offense. If they're going to go RPOs, it's going to be like Lamar Jackson and the number 3 target in the Ravens offense, where I think Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert are going to be the 1-2 in terms of fantasy value receiving. So what's the number 3 going to be worth in fantasy in this specific offense tied to Jalen Hurts, who, as much as he's going to be a big fantasy guy, I still have reservations about his passing. So that kind of gives me hesitancy there. But Jerry Judy passed the eye test, even when he was dropping balls like he was wearing oven mitts. I don't really think that's going to be the true nature of him going forward. You can just see that the guy has just got it all. And I do think Teddy Bridgewater will be a nice upgrade from what he had last year, as well having Courtland Sutton running alongside him.
Definitely. And we could see those prices take off if that Aaron Rodgers trade to Denver does indeed happen. But there's just a look at 3 guys in Jake's breakout wide receiver column: Henry Ruggs, Jerry Judy, Jalen Reagor. 7 more. Be sure you are subscribing to The Athletic. All right, guys, one more thing I want to touch on just really quickly. It was in the news. I thought it was worth us getting to. We don't need to spend too much time on it. First, I'm going to give you the third clue for Guess That Player, and then we'll name the player after we talk about this last subject. Clue number 3, I'm playing with my 4th different starting quarterback over the last 3 seasons. So he's a number 1 at his position, his 3rd year in the NFL, and this is now going to be his 4th different starting quarterback over the last 3 seasons. Keep that in mind. We'll talk about him in a couple of minutes. Lamar Jackson And the Ravens offense apparently adding a little bit of a new wrinkle. Lamar going to be taking more snaps under center. This was some news that came out in a discussion that Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator, was having with Ravens season ticket holders. Just a little snippet of what he said. He said of Lamar being under center, that's definitely going to be a part of what we do this year, the percentage of which I cannot state at this point. It's something we will certainly use from time to time, some game more than others. I believe it's a very important part in the development of a quarterback from a forward standpoint. So we know Lamar, if we take this just at face value, he's going to be doing it more. Lamar was under center just 4% of the time last year. He has 127 career snaps under center. That is the fewest for any quarterback with at least 10 starts since Lamar has been in the league. So this would be a little bit of a change if they do step it up. My question to you guys, and you can start this one off, Brandon, is it a meaningful change in the fantasy world?
Well, I think you have to think that they're going to try because look, as great as Baltimore's offense has been under Lamar Jackson, and they've averaged about 29 points with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's played 4 playoff games and has averaged 13 points. Mm-hmm. So this team gets figured out in the playoffs when they play good teams. And it's like, you can't keep banging your head against this wall. So you have to do something. I mean, they were last in receiver receptions the last 2 years. They were second and third to last in RB receptions. And the only guy that Lamar Jackson throws to is Mark Andrews. You got to change that because it's not working. It works great in the regular season, but that's not what it's all about. So I believe they're going to try. I don't think Greg Roman's very creative when it comes to that, but I think he's going to do it, give his best effort to see if they can do something and add some wrinkles to Lamar Jackson in the passing game. And TBD, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, guess what? I'm going to come with math because I don't want to be too much conjecture for you.
I love when you bring math to the table.
I'm kidding.
I'm
kidding because we're on the same page.
Per game math.
I'm 100% joking. So I'll just throw it out there as this for everybody listening, and you both, Belair and Funston. Will we say 20% is an enormous jump in anything in sports? Yes. 20% increase in attempts thrown would still get Lamar Jackson only to 500 attempts. Mm-hmm. That's the problem with the Ravens offense. And not to mention, Greg Roman has proven nothing to actually think that he is going to be passing the ball that significantly more. Again, 20% gets him to 500, and 500 is still a ridiculously low number when you're parsing it out across Mark Andrews, the backfield, Marquise Brown, and where it really comes down to is why I'm inherently doing this. This is an anti-Bateman tweet. This is so for everybody out there to say it. This is like, I love him. It's a terrible situation unless Marquise Brown just disappears and they do throw it at least 500 times. It's just not going to be a fantasy factor that we can lean on, and that's the biggest issue. So yes, what it comes down to at the end is what I say often a lot: buy the cake, not the icing. Just go buy Lamar Jackson at his QB6 price, which is just stupid, and it's going in the 6th round and stuff like that. That's who you want in this whole scheme of things. Just go get Lamar Jackson and don't even worry. And J.K. Dobbins, and don't worry about the rest.
Yeah. Wanted to talk about it just because people are talking about it and it's something that's out there, but it does have the feeling of something that is going to mean a little bit more to the Ravens in real life and how they size up in the AFC North and the AFC than with us in the fantasy world. So that is that. Let's talk about our guess the player, our mystery player. Drum roll. You've got the 3 clues. One more time. Widely viewed as the number 1 in my position. 3rd year in the NFL. 4th starting quarterback playing with this season. Guys, you got it?
I changed my answer. Well, so Brandon said he thinks he knows who it is, so I'll go first in case I don't have it right.
All right.
Because I had a different answer until you gave the 3rd clue. Like my initial for the first 2, a 1, and then 3rd season. I initially thought what we were talking about today. I thought you were doing like 1 with the show and talking about AJ Brown. So that's where I was initially going. But obviously not playing with his 4th different quarterback for the last 3 seasons. So I actually, you know what? I won't even say in case I'm right. Brandon, is it a tight end?
No, I think it's Terry McLaurin.
Oh, I was
there it is.
TJ Hawkinson.
Although I'm thinking about it, hasn't he had 5?
I'm sort of messing around with the 4 starting quarterbacks. I will say that because, right, you've had Haskins, you've had Alex Smith, you had
Taylor Heineke, right?
Yeah, but Heineke, like I'm sort of not counting Heineke in this because he didn't start a ton.
Well, and then wasn't there like a Colt McCoy?
So yeah, you should have given a minimum because technically TJ Hawkinson's right then now too. So like you should have given me a low, like with the David Blau and whoever else was. I forget the other one.
I guess that's
true.
Right.
That's true. That's true. David Blau and Jeff Driscoll. Yeah, Jeff Driscoll.
Thank you.
Stafford.
See, I told you I'm working out the kinks of this great idea that we're going to ride until we have more actual hard news to talk about here. But the guy who I really want to talk about is Terry McLaurin. No. We'll talk about TJ Hockenson eventually. I mean, he's going to eat everything up in that. Did you guys by any chance see the new Lions hat that's just like a giant L?
Oh, that's what everybody made the same joke yesterday.
Oh my God, like a little
too
on the nose.
Put
there.
A big L on the hat.
Little too on the nose for a team that's going to go like 2-15 this season.
Oh, 2-15. I was going to say they should
the under.
I was going to say, I wonder if they like superscript 17 right in front of it.
As long as they're not playing Houston, I'm taking the under on that.
Oh man! All right, enough fun with the Detroit Lions. Terry McLaurin. I just want to sort of leave this open-ended to you guys. I think he's going to just have an unbelievable season. Jake, I think wide receiver 13 is where you're at on him, at least in the most recent run I've seen. I mean, what does a season with Ryan Fitzpatrick for Terry McLaurin look like?
I think it just looks a little bit higher in his yards per reception, but possibly not a whole lot more. I think a lot of people are excited, and it really comes down to the fact that Curtis Samuel is just going to be a factor, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing for Fitzpatrick. That's a good thing for Washington. You can argue it's a good thing for Terry McLaurin, but again, I'm going to come back to math. Is Terry McLaurin really going to improve on his targets? That's what it comes down to. Like, he was the offense. You have Curtis Samuel, you have Logan Thomas, who broke out. They want to throw to the backfield more, apparently, which is still a concern because Fitzpatrick just doesn't do that inherently, which is part of my concern for, if you go back to the breakout running back piece, is part of my concern for Antonio Gibson, is that similar to Antonio Gibson and why I'm bringing this conversation, I think all the positives, and there are negatives to both of them, I think they all balance out, and we're getting almost the same thing. Like Antonio Gibson, you hope he gets more uses in the passing game, probably does, but he also scored a hell of a lot of touchdowns for how many times he carried the ball. So maybe that offsets. If Fitzpatrick doesn't throw to him a lot, that offsets. So Terry McLaurin, similar thing. More efficient, probably maybe a little less coverage on top of him, but the targets possibly decrease. So almost a net neutral, but with a slight uptick. I like McLaurin a little bit more of an uptick than I do for Gibson at the running back position. And McLaurin at 13, right there with Evans, Allen Robinson, Keenan Allen, Godwin, Cooper. And if you want to take him over any of those, I don't have a problem with it. I think that tier is just very robust.
8.9 targets per game, by the way, last year for
8.9
for Terry McLaurin. That ranked. Oh my God! Why does this not have
second?
Don't you hate when there's a listing that doesn't have numbers next to it? And I got to count this. The first one I found: 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11th in the NFL. 8.9 targets per game a season.
I was going to say there's only 9 or 8 because he tied with Tyreek Hill in 15 games. Actually, the exact same, by the way. I was going to say there's only 8 guys in front of him, and only 2 of them played 14 games. That was Adams and Keenan Allen.
Right. And then the other, there's 2. The other 2 are tight ends, Travis Kelce and Darren Waller. Both had more targets per game than him too.
Well, I mean, like Jake said, quality of targets should improve. He's been low 60% completion percentage. Maybe that goes to mid 60s or a little bit higher. Like, this was an offense that struggled to score. He had 4 touchdowns last year. Maybe he can get 7 or 8 this year. I mean, I think there's ways he can improve, but it's going to be hard to improve on the actual volume alone. I think it's just going to have to be on the quality of that volume.
My God, guys, I've had our camera, I've had the Zoom like off my screen because I've just been looking at the show sheet and the timing and all that. I'm really just coming over here for the first time. I've got this new webcam. I think I'm going to need to wear makeup next show. I look washed out. This camera's totally washing me out. I'm gonna have to put on some foundation or something. This is ridiculous. I gotta go
mess with the levels.
I gotta mess with something. I look like warmed over death. My God. I'm gonna end the show.
You don't look that bad.
I'm gonna end the show right there because I just can't. Oh my God, I can't believe I've let my camera look or my face look like this for an hour. We're gonna call it a show. We're wrapping things up here on the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, athletic.com/fantasyfootballpod gets you in the door. Everything we do at the Athletic, $3.99 a month. For Jake and Brandon, I'm Michael Beller. We'll be back with you next week. Until then, thanks for listening. Thanks for dealing with my mug for an hour. We'll talk to you in a week.